It's a time of change within the weather and within the systems. So it's going to be both heavy and perhaps a bit light, but it's always going to be a good vibe, and that's what we're hoping to bring into this episode of The Metalhead. Welcome, everybody, to our first ever kind of YouTube edition of this. If you're listening to this on your podcatcher, we have uploaded this episode to YouTube, so you can see our lovely faces.
Or not so lovely, depending
or
on
not
how
so
you
lovely.
feel about us.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think it's lovely, but I'm a little biased.
Same, positive attitude.
So yeah, and welcome the newcomers to our little YouTube channel. This is a chill, meditative podcast around predominantly metal music or progressive rock music. So it's just going to be a good time. Got some chill vibes. We're going to talk about some news. We're going to do a couple album reviews. But we like to start off our little show just checking in and seeing what we're both listening to. So, Grace, I'd love to know what you're listening to these past couple of weeks.
Well, I've been tangibly listening in two different eras. I've been listening to 2023 because it's getting to that time where we got to start consolidating and thinking about what are the good albums from the year. So I'm playing catch up a little bit. It's been bad this year, so I'm kind of going through my list of like albums I really wanted to check out and missed out on, and I found some pretty good ones. But I've also been living in the past, in the opposite era. I got a car recently, and there's no Bluetooth audio. There's a CD player, but it's inaccessible because it's in the boot. So I'm reliant on cassettes. So I've been acquiring cassettes recently and listening to all sorts of just like super old tapes from like the 70s and 80s. So bits of like Genesis, yes, Steve Hackett, Rick Wakeman, GTR, like that kind of era of music, because I just went into like a couple of secondhand record stores, and just right in the corner, dusty in a little box, they've had some cassettes, because obviously they're very out of fashion these days. And I get why, because a lot of the ones I've tried have been very, very cursed in their audio. Yeah. So that's where I've been at the moment. Complete dichotomy there.
I mean, yeah, I grew up on cassette tapes. That was my first medium of music. That was how I first started listening to music, and I still have like a bunch of old cassettes from when I was a kid. And this past weekend, I was in Toronto, and I was looking through one of my favorite record stores, and they have a very small cassette tape section, and I was able to find Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction there, which I remember having in my dad's car growing up. And it's interesting because I picked up a tape player last year, like a little cassette Walkman, and I find there are certain albums, because they were mixed and mastered when cassette was the go-to music listening medium, that sound really, really good as a cassette. And so like the Supertramp's Brother Where You Bound, Power Windows from Rush, a couple of my Backstreet Boys cassettes. I have Queensryche's Operation Mindcrime. So like pretty much like anything from like 1984 or 5 to about the early 90s, like 94 or 5. I find like it sounds really good on cassette, but anything before that and anything after that, like I have the new Metallica album on cassette, and I have the new Ghost record on cassette, and they just sound like dog shit. Like they just sound horrible. Absolutely horrible on cassette. But that Brother Where You Bound cassette sounds pristine, like obviously you're going to get the hiss and you're going to get the weird track sound. But yeah, there's just, I don't know. It's got this little bit of a nostalgic quality to me. So yeah. Anyway, I've been diving deep and listening to the new Green Lung album almost on repeat.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be talking about that later on in the episode. But I've also, I mean, there's a couple albums that I can't talk about that I've been listening to that I've just been loving. But have you heard the new Earthside single that they released for their upcoming album?
I've not, no. I've seen a lot of
It's
people talking about Earthside lately because they've got the whole album coming out pretty soon, right?
They
Or
do,
is it
yeah.
already out?
So
I'm kind of not aware.
well, here's the thing. Like they have half of the album out already, with this EP called Pattern of Rebirth, and I'm currently listening to it, and it sounds really good. I was lucky enough to see Earthside right after they released their, I want to say it was their debut album of A Dream in Static, and I think up to this point it's the only album they've released. And they're fantastic. You know, if you're looking for some symphonic prog with genty styles every once in a while, you know, kind of picture like a Tesseract or a Periphery, but more in the vein of like early Haken. That's kind of what we're getting with these guys, and I've been enjoying it. I'm
Oh,
really looking forward to their new album. Because this EP is really blowing my socks off. I'm really liking it.
great. I mean, yeah, I guess I'll have to keep my eye out for that then. That's exciting.
Yeah, because the full length album is supposed to be like over an hour. So
Cool. I mean, nothing wrong with new music. I'll
you
take it when it
gotta
comes.
love it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Speak. Yeah. Speaking of which, I also went to a gig last week, which was pretty
Yes.
good. Went to a band called Elder, who it's now the second time I've seen them live, and I've never been hugely into their studio stuff necessarily. I think just for lack of trying more than anything. But their live shows go incredibly hard. They were kind of just, I don't know, sort of the black metal vibes with the super dark lights, the smoke, everything, and kind of just not really saying a lot, just sort of like, here's the next song. And they're quite well known for playing short sets in terms of the number of songs. So they only played 7 tracks, I think, last week.
Yeah.
But the set was like long because half of those tracks are like 20 minutes of just like jamming and riffing and like, yeah, it was very cool. They were touring with keyboards for the first time as well, so you had these kind of like dirty organs happening in the background. Yeah, it was great. And then there's a couple of support bands as well, so it was like a full night of kind of stoner kind of stuff. They had a band called Steak, who I'd not seen before, who were pretty good. And then there was another one called, I want to say Slamosa. I think that's the right pronunciation.
Yeah. Like mimosa, but slim, like slamosa.
Yeah, but I think it's like pronounced with some sort of accent somewhere. You know, there's those
Slimosa.
Slomosa. I don't know.
Slamosa. Oh, no.
Something Scandinavian, I think.
Right.
But I saw both them and Elder at Desert Fest in Berlin last year. So I was like, oh,
Nice.
great. Like, so yeah, it's like this combination of stuff coming together was great. You know, it was an awesome evening.
That's great. Yeah, and I loved their last album, Elder's last album of Innate Passage. So any chance to see them live, that would be, you know, a pretty good time.
Yeah. I mean, they've been touring a lot. Like I found out recently that the entirety of the band, have both American and German citizenship, which basically means they just don't need visas to
Yeah.
do stuff. So they're just like touring all the time, making the most of that. You know, they can get all over Europe easily. They can get all over the States easily. You know, so yeah, they're probably touring near you if you've not seen them recently. They'll be coming back, I'm sure.
That's pretty good, yeah. Amazing. And unfortunately, I haven't been to any concerts lately, so we can transition right into the news. And as you had said at the very beginning, you know, we're coming into the year-end lists, and I personally don't like thinking about the top 10 or the top 20 of the albums of the year until at least mid-November or mid-December. In my mind, I'm still waiting for two of the bigger releases for this year to drop, one being Moon Safari and the other one being Fido, before I even start thinking about a top 10 or the best albums. But looks like Metal Hammer is getting on there.
They're on it. You can start voting already.
You can start voting. That's right. Yeah. So, yeah, you can vote for the best metal album of the year, 2023. And there's some really good choices that they have on here. I mean, there's, I can't even begin to count. I want to say like almost 100 entries, if not more, maybe 300 or 400.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
There's a lot. And so, like, I'm glad to see some of the smaller acts like Earn, which I really loved with their album A Feast on Sorrow. You have Green Lung is even on here with their album that we'll be talking about later on. King Giz is on here with their Petrodraconic Apocalypse. I mean, like In Flames is even on here. Which I didn't even get around to listening to. So, but then of course you have the big heavy hitters.
Yeah, I fell off them a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. I saw In Flames opening for Rings of Saturn and the Faceless way back in like 2015 or so, and they were fine. They were all right. But yeah, they've got like some of the big heavy hitters are on here, like Judas Priest and Metallica, Sleep Token, which I wouldn't be surprised if Sleep Token's pretty high up there. I think a lot of people really, really loved that new album from them.
Yeah, it certainly blew up.
Yeah, I'm still, I don't know, I'm still not 100% sold. I mean, it's fine for what it is, but I don't know. There's a lot of albums on this list that I would submit first. So, and there's even a section to add in your own submission. So, if there's an album or a band in the metal genre, like, I wonder if Haken is even on here, because they put out their album this year, which
super early in the year.
I really liked.
They aren't on the list. Interesting.
That's shocking. All right. Well,
that's where they were broken into the mainstream a little bit now. Like, I don't know. I mean, Metal Hammer isn't exactly that mainstream, but in terms of the other bands on here, like Haken have shared a stage with a lot of them at all their festival days this year. So, who knows?
And
who knows?
Like, I know with their Vector Virus, that really broke them through a little bit more on the mainstream. And I'd like to think that Fauno was, kind of the bridge between the more accessible stuff and their more proggy stuff. But who knows?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, the voting is open. I'll leave a link in the description. So if you guys want to voice your own opinion, I believe you can vote for 10 albums. And they even have a fairly comprehensive playlist with well over, I think it's maybe one of each. So there's 100 entries in this massive playlist from Spotify that Metal Hammer has put on, the best metal songs from 2023. So
that's kind of nuts. I mean, my own list is, I don't know, I think it's about 50 at the moment that I'm trying to narrow down. And like, that's just stuff that's come out and stuff that I've gone, oh, well, maybe that sounds interesting. And that's specifically just in like the prog niche. Like, that's not even counting, like other stuff that's come out. Like they've got 72 Seasons here from Metallica, which is like, I want to say it came out this year, but was it last year? Has it been that long?
No, pretty sure it was this year. Yeah.
It feels like I've been living with that album for quite a while.
I know.
Yeah, it's stuff like that. It's like I need to add it onto my like overall full list of stuff. I'm kind of, I don't know. I think I'm going to get quite into it this year. I think I'm gonna end up with a proper like SA, BC kind of tier list thing going on.
Oh wow. I'm excited to see
Maybe.
that. I know I every year it just gets more and more crazy for me in terms of trying to come up with my top 10. I think last year I had to narrow it down to a 25. But yeah, we'll see. And we'll definitely have our own top 10 at the end of the year.
Oh yeah,
So,
for sure,
yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
for sure. But yeah, let's move on to the festival watch. This is a segment where festivals all throughout the year are chatted about. Sometimes we're able to make it to it, but this was a festival that I I found and I'm very excited for. Because we are, of course, talking about the When We Were Young festival that's happening next October. It's a single date from what I'm seeing. Saturday, October 19th at the Las Vegas Festival Grounds. This isn't the
I
only.
didn't realize it was just one day. Like
Yeah,
that's
because
that's
I.
a crazy amount of bands. Like even just like the setup for that to like have all
Yeah,
the stages, the food, the vendors, the merch, everything for one
yeah,
day.
yeah.
You could easily split this
Um,
to 3 days with and not add any more bands, and it'd still be an insane festival, right?
Now, I'm wondering if, because the way that they're marketing it, like they're almost marketing it with like full albums from these bands. So, like, it seems like one of the main headliners is My Chemical Romance. And
Mm-hmm.
it's saying that they're doing the Black Parade. Uh, Coheed and Cambria is doing God's Apollo. I'm Burning Star 4. And like most of these bands are kind of touting a like one of their big albums, like Jimmy Eat World with
Yeah.
Bleed America, A Day to Remember with Homesick, um, Simple Plan with No Pads, No Helmet, Just Balls. Um, but then every once in a while you'll just get a band name like Fallout Boy, um, like LS Dunes. So I
Yeah.
wonder if these bands are just going to play the album that they're advertising, or kind of like what's the deal? Like, I think we all know who, Mayday Parade is. We don't need to know that they're coming from a lesson in romantics.
Yeah, I reckon it's just like it's an advertising thing, right? Because it's on the back
Yeah.
of a CD cover. Like I would be very surprised if all of these bands agreed to play just their most famous album because there's like 40 bands there. Like there's
Yeah.
no way all of them are gonna. Like you need like 7 stages or something to house all of that if everyone's playing an hour set of their
Yeah.
like biggest album. So yeah, I don't know. But I don't know. Maybe there are 7 stages because ticket prices are not cheap. I always look at the cost of
Mm-hmm.
American festivals and I'm just like, oh, that's scary.
Well, I know for you it's even double because you got to pay for airfare, right? But
Yeah,
like
I
what?
mean that. Yeah, I don't
I
think
mean,
I
I
would.
would I would too. I'm up in Canada and trying to get down to Las Vegas is you know, what got me was the pre-sale. All tickets start at $19.99 down. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Um, but then I scroll down and I see the general admission at $325.
Yeah,
So it sounds like there's payment plans available for individuals that wouldn't require it. Um,
yeah,
and I don't know, like on the one hand, I'm like, oof, $325 for a single day is pretty spicy. But then of course I see the lineup and I'm like, okay, they can get away with that, I guess. So
it's still pretty spicy because when
still
you
pretty
go in,
spicy.
you're gonna have to pay for parking, for this, that, and the other. The
Hmm.
food's gonna be super expensive. That's I just don't know who's spending that amount of money on this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. I don't know. Like a lot of the festivals that have been going on seem that expensive. Like the one that just went past in I think maybe the same. No, it wasn't. It wasn't Vegas. It was in the same grounds of Coachella.
Mm.
Was the it's the 3-day festival with, I think it was like Metallica, AC/DC, Ozzy Osbourne was supposed to be playing, but he dropped out. I think
Yeah.
Slipknot, maybe Def Leppard. I don't think it was
Mhm.
Def Leppard.
Mhm.
But that kind of like ilk of, they just had 6 bands. That was like insanely expensive. It was like $600 or $700 for a ticket. And it's like, okay, well, you want to get there, you have to drive, you want somewhere to stay. Well, the hotels in the area are like $400 a night or something stupid. And I'm just like, who is this for?
So yeah, that's our festival watch. We'll be keeping our eyes on that. That just spurred my mind. I remember reading somewhere that Jack Osborne, because you were saying that Ozzy dropped out of one of the big festivals, has basically confirmed that his dad won't be doing any more tours, and that the single gigs like here and there, that's not off the table. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we've seen that coming. We're not all that surprised about that. So,
Yeah. I think
yeah.
the contrary would be surprising at this point. Like if you watch the podcast, like that the Osbournes are now doing, the 4 of them. I've watched I think 3 or 4 of them, just to like get a bit of a flavour of what they're doing. And Ozzy is an old man, like fundamentally, nothing against the guy, but he's an old man, and doing a big tour like that, it's a young man's game, especially with the kind of style of production and everything that Ozzy Osbourne's known for, the aggressive sort of stage presence and everything. I would be surprised if it came back, which is a shame. I had tickets for the Ozzy Osbourne tour back in like 2018, but coming up on 6 years since then, and it's well and truly cancelled. But yeah, I'd be very shocked to see him doing a proper full 2-hour set kind of thing ever again, really, which is kind of a real shame. He's such an icon, but that's life.
Yeah,
People get old.
That's life. Yeah, I was lucky enough to see him tour with Black Sabbath when they were promoting their 13 album, but that was the only time, and that's going to be the only time I'll be able to see him. So I'd like to consider myself lucky to see that. But
yeah. I mean, I am incredibly thankful. I call the Black Sabbath like the last Black Sabbath tour, because I think if I hadn't seen that, I would be so gutted.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, okay, I've seen him once. It's fine.
Yeah.
Check
At
box.
least I got that under my belt, right? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so let's move into the last segment of the show, the album review, and we've been teasing this one throughout the entire podcast. A Green Lung. Now, I think between the two of us, I might have a little bit more to say about it. So, do you want to take the lead and talk about your experiences with it?
Yeah, I can talk about it for a little bit. So I first really came across Green Lung early this year. They were playing at Download Festival, and some friends of mine were like, "Oh, we're going to go and see Green Lung. Like, that's the one band we're excited for this weekend." And I was like, "All right, well, if that's like one of the main reasons you wanted to, one of the reasons you're getting out your tent today, I'll check them out. I'll give them the time of day." Didn't really know what to expect. And I went along and I watched, they had like an hour set. It was great fun. Proper kind of like modern hard rock. Reminded me a lot of Clutch, who were also playing at the festival that weekend. And yeah, it was good. Enjoyed it. I was like, I should check these guys out more.
Yeah.
And I parked that thought until recently, when the new album's been coming out and they're doing the singles, and I was like, Green Lung, okay, let's come back around. Let's have a little look. Now's the time to have a little investigation. And seeing them outside of the context of a live show, listening to their music, a few times, trying to get it into my head a little bit rather than just, fleeting at a festival. I feel like it's good. It's cool. It's fun.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like they have their own sound, really. Like, it's they just kind of sound like Ghost. Like, really, really heavily. And, and Ghost have their identity with the theatrics and the storytelling. Green Lung don't really have that identity, so they're just kind of doing music in a style similar to Ghost and style similar to Deep Purple, that kind of like hard rock, blues rock kind of stuff. But I don't know. It hits, like it's fun, it's good, but I don't know. Maxine, the song Maxine from this album, I really like. That is objectively incredibly catchy, and I'm enjoying that. But yeah, like This Heathen Land, I don't know. It's not as standout as I'd like it to be. I was expecting more, but
That's fair.
they're playing a show in London in 3 weeks. Am I considering going? Very heavily. If I can get my hands on a ticket, I think it'd be really fun, because that's kind of the thing. It's not necessarily about, they're the next John Petrucci or, Steve Vai or whatever. They're just guys playing music, and it's fun. They're a fun live band. So I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing them again, and that's kind of my scenario. I'm like, I don't need to listen to these guys, but if they're somewhere at a festival that I'm at, or they're a support, or, even they're playing a headline show, I'll probably go and see them.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that their future kind of album releases have a bit more kind of their own personality, like a uniqueness to what they're trying to do, rather than just my immediate reaction being, they sound like Ghost. When I played them to a friend of mine, they were like, oh yeah, it kind of sounds like Ghost.
Mm-hmm.
And that just seems to be the reaction, which I think is incredibly harsh and kind of a shame. And I think it's hard to, scope out and carve out your own musical identity these days when there's so much of it. But they really sound like Ghost.
Yeah. Yeah, I played these guys for my partner, and she had that same sentiment. She's listening to them. She's like, "Oh, this is good. This is interesting, but they really sound like Ghost." Like at first, she thought it was Ghost. And she's like, "When did Ghost put out a new album?" And I'm like, "No. This is Green Lung." She's like, "Oh, okay." Because they sound a lot like Ghost. I'm like, "Yeah, I know." Even like the lead singer is doing the best like Tobias Forge that I've ever heard. What I will say, I've been loving this album. I've been playing it almost nonstop since it released. I feel as if this is the album that I was hoping that Ghost would have put out after Meliora or Prequel. This is more of the style of Ghost that I love. The last two albums from Ghost, even though they had some really, really good moments on it, it never really connected all that well with me. Like this is the style of Ghost music that I love. So I'm much more favorable to this, because I will listen to this album, I think, before I would listen to Imperia or Prequel. And I think a lot of that has to do with the keyboard player that's found on here. The organ sound that he's able to command reminds me of some neo-prog stuff from like the very, very early 2000s. Right. Like there's one band in particular, it's very like underground neo-prog group called La Tulipe Noire. They put out an album that had a song called The Haze, and the keyboards from that album, it feels as if they cut and paste onto this album. And it's, if you haven't heard La Tulipe Noire with their track The Haze, it's a masterpiece. It's one of the best prog tracks I've heard, specifically in keyboards. And that's what brought me back to this. So, tracks like Maxine and Hunters in the Sky just have that massive keyboard that I wish more metal would command. So that's part of the reason why I've been coming back to this. I've been loving it. I love that they're much more full frontal with their satanic imagery, since Ghost has been putting their foot back off on the accelerator. These guys are pushing it back down. And I'm all here for that. So I've been loving it. I would be shocked if this album didn't end up on my top 10 list for the year.
Top 10? Oh.
Top 10. Oh yeah, I'd be hard pressed. It might even be in the top 5, if I'm being perfectly honest. So, yeah.
A lot of competition in this book. A lot of competition. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about top 10 for me, but
yeah.
It's an album. I didn't dislike it.
Yeah.
Fun.
So that's where I'm at for this album. I've been loving it. I immediately ran to an album online seller and picked it up. So I'm just eagerly awaiting for it to arrive at my doorstep. So yeah, I've been loving it. So
very cool.
Yeah. And I think with that brings our episode to a close. Do we have any other? I think that's all I've got in terms of the notes. Do you have anything else?
I don't think so. No, I think that is everything. That is the summation.
We did another one. So thank you everybody for tuning in, checking out our video as we've put it on YouTube. And if you're watching this on YouTube, consider listening to all of our other episodes that we have on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all the podcatchers. They're all there. Consider giving us a listen. If you want to stay connected, we've got an email address. It's themetalheadpod@gmail.com. We have socials all over the place. Instagram, Twitter. I think all of them are Metalhead Pod. And be sure to send this around. Spread the word. We're trying to. I realized that we had missed our first year anniversary doing this. It was back in September, and we just flew right by it. So, yeah, we've been doing this for over a year. So yeah, but this is our 25th episode, so we wanted to do something a little fun with it. So yeah, I want to thank Grace for providing the music and being an amazing co-host. And I think that's going to be it. This is where Grace says our send-off catchphrase.
Oh yeah, which is it's the same every week. It's always the same.
It is the same. Always the same.
Yeah. If you discover them on the floor, then lift them out.